Hello, everybody. My name is James Langen, and I am the President and Chief Engineer at Emerald Technology Group. I have about 23 years of corporate IT experience, and today's discussion is on cybersecurity and what every organization needs to be doing to protect itself. What we're going to start with today is a video of Robert Herjavec, one of the sharks on ABC's Shark Tank, having a discussion at a bank trade event. So this is going to be a directed conversation to those in the banking industry, but I feel that most of what he has to say applies to all industries at this point, or will in the very near future. Have a listen.
Feel good and tune in next week, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Robert, we've got more questions coming in, but I have to ask you about cybersecurity. You have this incredible organization dedicated to making that online world secure. We have an audience here whose primary concerns has to be the security of all of that data, of everything that's going into the cloud, the way we're working online. What is the current state of cybersecurity? Can we ever be truly safe?
Well, I think whether you care about data or you care about cybersecurity or not doesn't really matter, because the government is going to make sure you do. So
what he's referring to there is compliance and regulation. He's talking, again, specifically to banking, but this applies to HIPAA, healthcare organizations, as well as PCI. And we're also seeing more regulation across the globe, and I know it's coming to the United States as well, where we're going to have breach laws that talk about what every business has to be doing when a breach occurs, because all personally identifiable information is important. So that's what he's referring to there.
This industry is one of the highest compliance-oriented industries
banking
in the world. And unlike many other industries where there's less compliance and less regulation, I guarantee you, everybody in this room, you're going to have more compliance and more regulation. You're going to see more responsibility for your customers' information. You're going to see more risk associated with it. So it's how do you continue to innovate in light of that? The world is becoming more connected. It is impossible today to stop a cyber breach. Right? Impossible.
Listen carefully to the words he says there. It is impossible today to stop a cyber breach. Well, James, why even have this conversation then? Because of what he says next, and this is going to take up the bulk of our conversation today, but do let those words sink in. It's very important. It is impossible today to stop a cyber breach.
Anybody that tells you should spend more money on preventing one is lying to you, because you can't spend your way to security. So the idea is, how quickly can you respond if somebody breaches? All these breaches that we've all heard about, Sony, Target, what they don't tell you is, in the case of Sony as an example, because Barbara and I work for Sony, they own our show, they were actually breached 8 months before they knew they were breached. You're not really responsible if somebody gets in, but you are responsible for knowing how long they're on your network. And that's where a lot of the investment has to happen, is in responsiveness to a cyber breach. And so it's how do you protect your data? How do you communicate with your customers? How quickly do you know there's an adversary on your network? And by the way, the adversaries are changing. It's no longer kids hacking into your system, right, because they think it's cool. And it's not just criminal organizations getting in, it's foreign state governments. We're sitting here in Las Vegas. I don't know if you realize this, but about 1.5 years ago, the largest data breach by a foreign government against a private corporation occurred right here in Las Vegas. There was a multi-billion-dollar company that was attacked by the government of Iran and was brought down for 48 hours. Wow. And so this is happening, it's going to happen, and there's just going to be more of it.
It's really frightening, but the words of wisdom there are, you have to be fast enough to respond. That's now going to be the new measure.
Well, I think what the mistake that companies make is they can't prove what good looks like when something bad happens. And so what we always encourage companies to do is you have to have a line in the sand. You have to have an assessment. We call them vulnerability assessments. Or you have to know what the state of the environment is today. Because when something happens, you have to know what it looked like before.
Right.
Is this new? Is this malware new? What did it look like before?
Very interesting. Well, thank you. Frightening words, but you need to know this stuff.
We do need to know this stuff. What are the notes, in Robert's discussion? What do we need to take away from this? Well, I already talked about it. It is impossible today to stop a cyber breach. And to extend or elaborate on that, you can't spend your way to security. No amount of money is going to make any organization 100% bulletproof. They will find a way in. Technology changes, and the bad guys are always at least one, if not two or three steps ahead of us. They know about exploits years before we do. So what really matters, per Robert, is how quickly can you respond if somebody breaches. I would like to extend that and say it's not even necessarily how quickly you can respond, but how prepared you are to respond and how you respond. That is really important. Like you mentioned, Sony had been breached for 8 months before they even knew it happened. Equifax, how long had that person been in there? Usually these exploits can occur for months or years before we know that somebody bad is in our infrastructure. How we respond is more important than how quickly we respond. But the fact that we have a plan to respond is what really matters. So what I'd like to start with, and reach out to me, I can get you a copy of this, but these are 15 things your organization needs to be looking at when trying to protect itself against a cyber attack or enhance its cybersecurity position. These aren't the only 15 things. There are more. But these are definitely 15 things that every company should be taking a solid look at. And if you do these 15 things, you're going to be better prepared than most organizations out there. Again, get a hold of us. We can get you a copy of this, talk you through these, no obligation. But let's start rolling through them. The first thing we'll take a look at, and Robert spoke to this, we need to know what does good look like. And the only way we're going to know that is through a security assessment. This is a non-intrusive system that goes through and takes a snapshot of how your environment looks today. This is a great tool to validate that your technicians or your IT provider are doing a good job or doing everything they need to be doing. A great example is we ran an assessment on a large organization who thought they were dotting their I's and crossing their T's, but had no group policy in place for password management. It's mandatory, right? We need to be doing this. So not only can we get a sense of what good looks like so that we know what bad looks like, but we can also have an understanding of what's in place today and make inroads to better secure our environment. This needs to be happening at least once a year, preferably quarterly. And the other thing to keep in mind is there are different kinds of assessments. There's just a security assessment, there's external vulnerability testing, there's penetration testing, internal security assessments, and the size of your organization, the compliance and regulations it's subject to are going to determine the kind of assessments that you need to run and how often they need to be ran. But at a bare minimum, every organization needs to be running a security assessment. Now, Datto is a large backup company, and they every year do a survey of all their managed providers, all their resellers in the nation or in the world really, and ask them a series of questions, because their big claim to fame has to do with recovering from a crypto virus or any malware that goes through and kind of bricks your environment. Their claim is that we can restore it very quickly. They want to know how environments or organizations are being impacted, what is causing their environments to become compromised. And so they run these surveys every year. Well, in 2016, the managed providers out there claimed that 49% of them claimed that the source of intrusion or the source of a crypto virus rolling through their environment was spam email. Spam email protection is kind of a no-brainer. We all are used to the days of having to have a spam filter in place to protect our environments. But going beyond that, we need to be better managing, monitoring, and using these systems to make sure that the bad guys aren't getting in. It's one of our first lines of defense because it's one of the most open conduits into the organizations that we serve and protect. How many here on this video or on this presentation know who Kevin Mitnick is? Kevin claims to be the world's greatest hacker. He's certainly one of the most popular hackers of our time. I got the pleasure of meeting him in Nashville in April and listening to him speak. And the takeaway I'll take from Kevin Mitnick, by the way, he's a principal of KnowBe4, which is a it's a training organization. They have training videos and systems in place to train your internal users on how to use the internet, how to know what to click on, what not to click on, what's secure, what's not. In addition to that, he tests them. KnowBe4 will send emails pretending to be a bad guy, trying to trick your users into clicking on something they're not supposed to, and then they'll notify you and let you know, hey, Susie clicked on this email. Susie might need a little more education on what to click on and what not to click on. And that's really the nugget of security awareness. Your users don't know what they don't know. We need to teach them about data security and how to be a good internet citizen. What emails are safe? What emails aren't safe? What do we bring to IT's attention or to my manager's attention? And this needs to be done with some frequency. It's not a set it and forget it. But also understand that this is one of the most important things you can do in securing your infrastructure. Your users are your most important and your weakest link. And if you're not tending to them and training them, the bad guys are. So definitely find and implement a good security awareness training system and testing system in your environment. Advanced endpoint security is a fun one for me. I am an engineer by trade. That's sort of how my mind works. I know everybody listening to this video and everybody who's listened to my presentations has antivirus installed on all of their machines. I, without a doubt, believe that. But on the flip side of that, how many of us actually trust our antivirus providers? How many of us actually believe that Trend Micro, AVG, ESET, Nod, McAfee, Norton are going to protect our computers when it matters? I have no faith. I don't believe that they work at all. I have seen so many viruses and malware blow through our encryption, our antivirus platforms with ease that I have zero faith. And it's because they're signature-based. They're using technology that's 30 years old, maybe older, to try to determine if a virus is bad or a file is bad or not. And the best way I can describe advanced endpoint security is through an analogy. Imagine you're at a bank and there's a security guard sitting there. And a guy walks into the bank wearing all black clothes, a ski mask, holding an assault rifle, and has a canvas bag on his side. Walks up to the security guard, hands him his driver's license. The guy checks the driver's license number against maybe the FBI's most wanted, maybe the previous records, crime records, and determines that this guy's okay. He hasn't done anything bad. We're going to pass him on through. That's what a traditional antivirus system does. Is it goes, you've never done anything bad in the past. I don't care how you're dressed. Go on through. Have a nice day. So the guy goes on through, robs the bank, and leaves. And the traditional antivirus system's like, what just happened? I don't understand. Well, the flip side of that is that advanced endpoint security is more behavioral based. It's looking at how you're behaving, how you're acting. So in this case, the bad guy walks up to the security guard, hands over the driver's license, and in due diligence, we're still going to check the signature of the file and make sure that it's not a known entity. Of course, we want to look at the information we have, but additionally, he looks at how he's dressed. He looks at the assault rifle. He looks at the ski mask and goes, hold on, wait just 1 minute. Something doesn't add up here. You look like a bad guy. You smell like a bad guy. Though you don't have the idea of a bad guy, I think something's amiss. Maybe he lets him through. Maybe he doesn't. But if he lets him through, maybe he escorts him to the desk and goes, hey, Mr. Bad Guy here would like to withdraw some money. He goes, I'm robbing this place. Time out. You're out of here. We're looking at the behavior of files. What is it trying to do? Well, if it opens a file and encrypts it, that behavior is bad. We're going to stop it in its tracks, put the file back to the way it was, run some analysis and forensics on what occurred, what IPs did we reach out to, what files did we send out, what files did we try to encrypt, what programs did we open and close, what data did we collect. We're going to put all that together. We're going to roll the environment back to the way it was. We're going to send this out to the Security Operations Center for review, and we're going to make this bad guy go away. Again, that is the fundamental difference, in my opinion, between traditional antivirus and advanced endpoint security. The one key thing in this is we as IT providers have always had a notion of set it and forget it. So we roll our antivirus platform out there, we configure our alerts, we set it, and we walk away. It's going to update, it's going to take care of itself, and it'll send me an email if something bad happens, and I'll look at it the next day. We need to be more proactive than that. We need to have somebody monitoring these systems 24/7. So I strongly encourage all of you to pair whatever endpoint security and a lot of other systems we're going to talk about today with a security operations center that's staffed and manned 24/7. It can be in-house, it can be outsourced. Your ROI or your cost is probably going to be a lot less if it's outsourced, depending on the size of your organization, but definitely pair this with a SOC so that these issues are dealt with in real time. All right, multi-factor authentication. I'd like to tell a quick story, if I may, about an organization we support. Now, I want to qualify this really quick. I have a reputation. I'm proud of the work I do. I've been in this industry for a very long time. My organization supports many different kinds of organizations in mainly Lane County, mainly the local area, but throughout the country. And we did have a Lane County organization who contracted with us to do some work, very arm's length. They have an internal IT resource, but they occasionally need help setting up a new server, doing a migration, or performing some other work. And this organization approached us one day and said, hey, we're having a weird issue. We're in Office 365. We have about 20-something users in there. And every email into our organization, out of our organization, or between users inside of our organization. So essentially every single email sent or received is bouncing, saying this yahoo.com email address doesn't exist. But we're not yahoo.com. So why is this happening? One of my lead engineers jumped in there, took a look, and found that there was a transport rule sending all email, regardless of direction, to a Gmail account, which was then being forwarded to a Yahoo. So I imagine that Gmail account was being used to send to many different Yahoo accounts or different email accounts. And Yahoo obviously detected that something bad was happening here and closed that account. What's interesting about this is we got they were having other issues. And so when we told them what was going on, they're like, oh, okay, that makes a lot more sense. Well, tell us more. Why does that make sense? Well, because we have had customers who we deal with internationally who said they paid us and we haven't shipped them product, but we haven't received the money. And what we believe has been happening is that somebody was doing kind of a man-in-the-middle attack where they were watching what we're doing. When we would send a PO or when we would send a request for funds to that customer, they were following up with another email that had a different routing number to a different bank account. And the customer was sending money to that bank account. We were never seeing that money. Then the customer would follow up with us a couple of weeks later and say, where's our product? Well, we never got the money, but we sent the money. And it became very clear to them what was happening. They were taken to the tune of about $80,000 in cash. Now, this customer opted to fulfill on all of those orders. They wanted to do the right thing. Even still, many of their customers lost confidence in them and are moving forward are no longer going to do business with them. They've said as much. So this $80,000 really is probably millions of dollars in lost revenue. I mean, if in a couple of weeks, these organizations spent $80,000 with them, you can imagine how much they had spent over the course of 5 years. So a 5-year cost to this breach is probably at least $1 million, probably millions with an S. The reason I surround this or I talk about this around multi-factor authentication, is I believe that this is the one thing that they most easily could have implemented to prevent this kind of attack. We believe that, and I'll talk about this in a few moments, the user or the bad guys got the credentials of one of the admins in the system, which happened to be a manager there, because they had gotten their information from the dark web. They had bought that password. But even with that password, if two-factor authentication had been turned on, that password more or less would have been useless inside of Office 365. And then you could argue one way or the other the security of MFA, but it at least is another level of security that the bad guys have to go through in order to get into your environment. So it's something that we strongly recommend. We require it of our customers who have admin accounts, and we strongly recommend it for all users to turn on MFA. And I'll add one more thing to this quick discussion, was that this customer, when we're having our wrap-up meeting with them about this breach, she mentioned to us that this happened around the time of the Equifax breach. And she's like, oh, and then the Equifax breach, our credit cards were breached as well, 2 of them. Well, that's interesting, because I didn't think credit card information had been part of the breach. It had been all the PII and all the personal information about their users. Like, well, did you by chance have your credit cards in your Outlook? Oh, yeah, they were in my notes. Okay, so clearly these bad guys have gotten in, perused your Outlook content, your notes, contacts, found those credit cards, and used them to perform other bad activities. So that's a note. Don't put anything sensitive in your Outlook. That needs to go somewhere else, a password manager or a encrypted file somewhere. Outlook is not the best place to keep really important information. Information that needs to be secured, such as passwords and credit card numbers. Okay. And Office 365 is not the only platform that we need to be providing MFA on. This is just one example of one system we need MFA. Anything that you're administrating needs to have MFA turned on, and preferably almost everything needs some kind of MFA. And Duo makes a great product. Many others make a great product that create a single sign-on MFA, so that you don't have to sit there and authenticate a ton, on all these various systems over and over and over again. You can 2FA once for the session that you're using your computer. So there are solutions that help mitigate the number of times that you have to do MFA, because I know it is a lot of work. Password management, this really shouldn't be passwords. This should say group policy security. But password management, I believe most people watching this video today have some kind of GPO in place, or group policy in place, to enact password management, as far as we need to change passwords every 90 days. They need to be complex. They need to be at least 8 to 10 characters in length. You can't reuse the same password. You can't change the password in the same day that you twice. But in addition to that, we need to be doing other group policy security. Sorry about that. Are we still recording? Yes, we are still recording. Okay, sorry about that. Our internet here is not the greatest. Let me share the screen again. All right. Sorry about that. Okay, so back to, we need to be making sure that we're, setting screensaver timeouts. We're setting the number of times a password can be, or somebody can authenticate with a bad password before an account is locked. We need to be setting other security things, limiting user access, take away local administrator privileges on workstations. All these are kind of no-brainer items that many organizations aren't doing today. So definitely make sure that you have your sysadmin go through and button up your GPO objects as soon as possible. This next one is kind of a no-brainer as well, and that's computer updates. And again, what it boils down to is you, at the very minimum, need to have Windows software update services in place, WSUS, or some kind of RMM such as SolarWinds, or if your MSP has like Kaseya or ConnectWise in place, that they're managing and monitoring your updates. As these exploits come out, we need to be able to run a report to tell us which updates are in place, which ones aren't. So we have a targeted list of the PCs to get up to date. Preferably, Your update management system has the ability to update third-party products such as Java, Adobe, Firefox, Chrome, so on and so forth. It's not just Windows that we need to be updating, it's all of the critical products on these computers that we need to be keeping up to date. I talked a little bit about dark web research a little while ago when I talked about the organization whose 365 account had been breached. Dark web is interesting in that up to about a year ago, I barely knew what the dark web was, and it was this bad place on the internet. You don't go. What it really is, the easiest description I can throw out there is it's the unindexed part of the internet where the really bad stuff happens. We're talking sex trade, illegal drugs, illegal content such as movies. But really, for us, what we're really interested in as it relates to our corporate or organizations we support and manage are their credentials and their PII, their personally identifiable information. We want to know if your information is on the dark web. And how this relates back to that 365 breach is when we were doing our forensics, we ran a search on their internet domain and found that user's username and password, and it matched her 365 credentials she had put out on the web, or that were available on dark web. And they matched, I'm sorry, I'm confused. They matched what she had in Office 365. So we believe that somebody found her credentials on the dark web and used them to gain access to her 365 account and then exploit this attack or run this attack on their organization. Definitely get with us to run a search on your domain to find out if you have credentials available on the dark web. And we strongly advise that you subscribe to a service, ours or another, to make sure that you are protected and know what's available on the dark web so that you can better and more educatedly make a decision on how to protect your organization. SIEM log management is an interesting topic to me in that back before we got involved with the partner we're using today, SIEM was this big beast we couldn't get our arms around. It was too large. We didn't, to fully and properly implement a SIEM for an organization of even like 100 computers, to do it right and to build your own SOC and to build your own management platform, to buy the software, license the software, to hire the team to manage it and monitor it, you're looking at probably a first-year investment of $500,000. It's that big. And what I've seen most organizations use are free products on the internet that gather logs from their firewalls, their event logs from their servers, their Linux servers, compile them, throw them into a database, and they're never looked at. Again, it's set it and forget it. Yeah, we have a SIEM in place. We just gather all the logs and they sit here. No forensics or no analysis is done on those to see if bad things are happening. It's sort of, they're looking at them reactively if they think something might have happened. They may never look at them again. They can't even tell you if all the systems are being logged. And we strongly encourage every organization, especially those with compliance needs, to implement a SIEM. The reason for that goes back to Robert's conversation about we need to know what good looks like so that we can know what bad looks like. He also talked about the attacker who had gotten into Sony's network for 8 months prior to them doing anything about it. Well, how would Sony know what that attacker did for 8 months unless they had something like SIEM or a log management platform in place, which I'm sure Sony did, but most of the organizations we support do not. So we need to be able to have a SOC monitor and manage this SIEM for us and tell us in real time if anything bad is occurring. We need to be able to tell when something bad occurs, what did the attacker take, access, or do to the infrastructure. And that's what SIEM partnered or coupled with a SOC gives us. We strongly believe that, well, what it really comes down to, again, is compliance. If you can't tell what an attacker did or took on your infrastructure from your environment while they're in your environment, then you have a breach, right? You have to notify, you have to go through the process. But if you're able to go back to your SIEM and review what they took, where they sent it, what systems they accessed, you may be able to say we didn't have a breach because they never accessed the EMR or they never accessed any patient information or PCI credit card information or any PII, if you're able to, beyond a reasonable doubt, show that these attackers didn't take that information, then you no longer do you have a breach on your hands and it's non-reportable. The cost of reporting a breach is extreme. So this is a really powerful compliance and auditing tool to have in your infrastructure. Our next item is web gateway security. And to me, this really couples into the firewall item we're going to talk about in a minute. Web gateway security in this really has to do with website filtering and being able to tell where your users and clients are allowed to go on the internet. There's many products out there such as Cisco's Umbrella or Siren or various other tools available to you today to do this. I strongly encourage my larger organizations to pair this with a good security-based firewall, such as a Fortinet or a Sophos or any of those that can provide you perimeter antivirus in addition to doing your web filtering. I know that when we started deploying security-based firewalls, we call them security appliances now, many years ago, we're probably talking 8 years ago, and we started doing antivirus at the perimeter, our virus rate inside of organizations fell through the floor. And I can't tell you the last time we had a virus removal on any of our customers that had a good security appliance on the perimeter of their network. So strongly encourage you doing this. I personally don't believe the DNS filters such as Cisco's Umbrella are enough. There's something is better than nothing because they're going to tell you what IPs are distributing bad content. But in the same breath, I don't believe they're anywhere near enough to provide the security that we need today. All right. Now, what I will say is they are nice for those laptops and individual machines that you have out and about that you can't put behind one of your security appliances. Having this in place on those for those users is a good idea. And like I said, something's better than nothing. I just don't think it's enough for our big environments. Mobile device security or mobile device management is something that's overlooked by a lot of organizations, and it's becoming a bigger and bigger threat. Attackers are understanding that our mobile devices are one of the easiest conduits and gateways to our environment. You know, Apple iPhones, Androids, tablets, these are all easy things that attackers can get their hands on and start perpetrating bad things. In addition, these devices contain a lot of sensitive business information. Can you tell me with certainty that they're all encrypted, where they're at, what information is stored on them, that the user has a good password on the device, that they don't have bad apps on there, that it's not virus and malware laden? And the answer for most organizations is no. We strongly encourage, especially compliance-based organizations, to install an MDM even on employee-owned devices. You can install MDMs that have minimal invasiveness, and that can be easily removed when the employee separates from the organization, but still allows us to better ensure that our data is safeguarded on that device. We talked a little bit about the firewall. The other half of the firewall piece that I didn't talk about on the web application or web gateway security are things like intrusion detection, DLP, data loss prevention, web application firewalls, things that we can be doing, advanced security features that we can be doing to prevent the bad guys from even getting in. IDS or intrusion detection has been really useful in front of web servers to detect a bad guy coming in. It'll just nuke the connection. It can scan for the most common, script kiddies running a really common script against your Linux server and just nuke the connection before it even gets to that server. So definitely a no-brainer to make sure those are turned on and correctly configured. Definitely audit the firewall policies you have in place and make sure those systems are turned on. One of the items I talked about when I started putting this presentation together was what an FBI agent taught me about encryption. And that's a little bit of a misnomer because it's technically what did an IRS agent teach me about encryption, but that doesn't sound quite as good. So a little bit of context. We had a client here in Lane County. It's a medical practice, larger medical practice, and they had a raid performed on them. I think there were 5 agencies: the FBI, the IRS, Health and Human Services, the local law enforcement, and then there was another couple enforcement agencies that all came in. 26 agents dressed right from your best cop show with the big medallion badges, the Glock on their hip, bulletproof vests, rolled in this building, secured the entire building, rolled all of the employees into one room, collected all their mobile devices, and started cloning all their mobile devices, served the search warrant to the owners, and shut the place down for the day. Now, what I will open with on this discussion is I do believe this client is innocent. I do not believe that the agents or that this investigation is warranted based on the information that I know, but that's not the premise of this discussion. So we were called, and this was a long, drawn-out day with lawyers, attorneys, the attorneys, federal attorney's office, the agents at the site, the owners, all trying to determine what they needed from us, and what we were and were not allowed to give them. And what I'll tell you is that we did our due diligence to be sure that we were acting in a legal way. We were following all of the HIPAA policies and procedures. We were complying with law enforcement and performing to our clients' wishes. So do note that all those I's were dotted, the T's were crossed. There was a lot of work in that. But at the end of the day, it was decided to, this environment, everything was encrypted. The servers were encrypted, the backups were encrypted, a lot of the workstations were encrypted, and law enforcement didn't have the keys. And they needed us to come in as the IT provider, decrypt the information, and make it available to them. So I spent the next 11 hours next to a handful of agents from various agencies, like I said, including the IRS and the FBI. And when you're in a small room with that many people for that long, you tend to make small talk. Not a situation I had ever seen myself being in, but was very interesting to be there when it occurred. And it was actually, I remember starting to ask all of the agents, but it was the IRS agent who gave me the most information about this, was asking them what they tended to see in these types of raids, what some of their problems were, and why they needed people like us. My assumption was they had a room that could go in, pull this information, and crack these keys, no problem. And according to this agent, and the others affirmed this, was that, and this is an exact quote, encryption is their kryptonite. Encryption is their kryptonite. They made it clear to me that had we not cooperated, they were going to pull all of the equipment from this site, all of the hard drives from the server. They were going to put them in that room that I envisioned, just like CSI, and they were going to attempt to decrypt the data. But there was no promise of guarantee. They couldn't tell me that they would succeed, and that it would take a long, long time, and the client may or may not ever get their equipment, their data back. She told me that many times they destroy the data, especially on RAID drives, when they try to decrypt the information. So she made it very clear, encryption is their kryptonite. I found that tremendously interesting. If our government can't decrypt this information with ease anyway, then the bad guys are going to have a hard time as well. So encryption is very, very important to implement. Kevin Mitnick speaks to this a lot, to make sure that everything you do is encrypted. So that's at rest, right? This information they're trying to gather is at rest. What about in motion? What about when we send emails? I do a lot of work for medical practices, and I can't tell you how many times we see medical practices sending PHI or patient information unencrypted via email. And there's no excuse for that. Encryption in motion is easy to implement. It's not that expensive, and it's a no-brainer. Anything that's critically important and we don't want others to see needs to be encrypted at rest and in motion. Okay. Backups is another one of these no-brainer items. All of us do it. All of us need to be doing it. What I would add to the conversation about backups is make sure to test your backups. Make sure regularly, not just once, set it and forget it, but have a quarterly plan for testing your backups. And then you need a disaster recovery plan, a DRP. It needs to be well thought out. It needs to involve the business units of your organization to find out what the requirements are. And it needs to be well documented and maybe even tested. How do we get access to this data quickly and have a great response plan if the building burns down, if there's an earthquake, if we lose access to the building, if there's a cyber attack, if there is a terrorist attack? It doesn't matter. We need to have a system in place to make sure that we can recover our data and our environment holistically, regardless of the scenario. So if our server catches on fire, we need to have another server sitting there or some kind of system in place that can easily bring our environment back to life with ease. And the last thing of our 15 things every organization needs to be doing is you need to have a good cyber insurance policy in place. One of the organizations we support has an internal IT resource. So again, we do projects for them, but we didn't manage them. They didn't come to us and say, and sign a managed services agreement. So they would come to us and say, hey, migrate our Exchange server, do this, do that. But they provided their own antivirus and their own systems. We got a call from them early one day that says, hey, all of the files in our environment, we can't open. When we open them, it's gobbledygook. Well, they're encrypted. There's a machine in your environment. There's 120 computers in this place. There's a machine in your environment that has a screen up that says you need to pay X dollars in Bitcoin. And so the IT guys started running around the organization, found that computer. The guy had seen it and was scared to bring it to anybody's attention because he was afraid of what he had done. We went in, performed the mitigation. They sent the staff home for the day. This organization had a great backup solution in place, so we restored all the data. We cleansed that computer. We actually pulled the drive, reinstalled Windows, and started over. And we gutted their antivirus system that was in place. We installed a new security-based or firewall that could do antivirus at the perimeter. Previous to installing that firewall, the IT guy on site had been cleansing 1 to 2 viruses a week. After we installed that firewall, I don't think they've had a virus in that organization in 2 years. Again, this just goes to show traditional AV just doesn't work. But at the end of the day, this organization had to send their staff home for 6 hours. They couldn't take calls from their clients or their vendors. Their installers couldn't work because they couldn't get access to their schedule or their cut sheets. The vendors, they couldn't pay vendors. Their accounting team couldn't work. 120 employees went, well, realistically, 110 employees went home for the day. That company sent them home with pay, and they lost a day of business, and they lost the trust of their customers. I can guarantee you this was a 6-figure hit to this organization after they paid for our mitigation and all the fallout from this incident. So they did have a cyber insurance policy in place. The cyber insurance policy paid for our mitigation. They paid for the employees to go home for the day, and they paid some loss of business type reimbursement so that this organization didn't feel this as harshly as they would have without this in place. Cyber insurance goes a lot further than that to make sure that, if you do have a breach, you have the cyber insurance policy not only provides the money for the breach, but they can also provide investigators and attorneys to help you with the breach. So having a cyber insurance policy is a really big deal, and we highly recommend it to all of our organizations. So that's it. That's the 15 things that every organization should be doing and more. I hope that was educational for you. I hope that helped you understand, bring some ideas into your organization on the things that you need to be doing. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to me, James at emeraldtg.com, or you can call us at 541-543-2507. Visit us on the web at www.emeraldtg.com. And I look forward to doing another one of these. Have a great day.